Steve Kilbey is more than the frontman of the church. He's a poet, a dreamer, and one of the most enigmatic figures in rock. And this Decoding the Interview, we look beyond the words to uncover the deeper story.
My father was a piano player and he loved music. And as soon as I could understand, he said, music is the most important thing in life. Please get together with a woman who loves music, because my mother didn't like music. As much as my father loved it, she hated it. Anyway, we were very poor. We were British migrants in Australia. And my father had one decent record when I was 4, and he had a little record player. And that record was Only the Lonely by Frank Sinatra. And it was all these beautiful torch ballads written by the state-of-the-art, recording, and Nelson Riddle doing the orchestrations. And the songs were by all the great songwriters up until, in those days that they had up until the late 50s. And it was just a beautiful album of torch ballads that deeply influenced me.
What Kilbey describes is more than nostalgia. It's the blueprint of his songwriting. His father gave him the sense that music was life itself, while his mother's distance may have taught him restraint. And that push and pull between devotion and detachment is stamped all over the church's music.
I don't think my drive came from my parents, though they didn't have any really extraordinary drive. My father could play, but he didn't sort of particularly care who heard him or not. I think it's more sort of feeling like I wasn't very good at anything, so I had to find something to impress them with. That kept me going through bad times, or times when I'm lifting an endless load of equipment up the back steps in some club where they hated me anyway, and people are jeering at me and I'm getting paid and all of that. You really need to have a bit of, as the Swedes say, some fire in your backbone to be able to get through those periods. Because some people would go, fuck that, that's it. It's that old thing as a musician, as a guy's got $5,000 worth of equipment and he carries around a $500 van to a gig 50 miles away to get paid $5. That's how it was.
Kilbey shows that ambition was never clean or easy. It wasn't only his father's support that propelled him, but the sting of rejection from peers, from audiences, and from the business itself. His drive comes not from certainty, but from fighting the constant feeling of being the outsider.
I can't talk about one without talking about the other, because Bolan was John the Baptist to Bowie's Jesus Christ. Bolan, you had to have Bolan. Bolan had to soften you up and open it up. And without Bolan, Bowie couldn't have. Bowie didn't steal any words or any devices from Bolan, but he didn't steal. He understood this idea. Bolan showed him, look what you can do with this. It's not like he stole his chords or his singing or anything, but Bolan had to be there first. I had loved lots of other bands. I'd loved lots of other musicians before these guys came along. But when Marc Bolan came along, I was 16. And for the first time in my life, I idolized someone. And then a year or two later, sadly and reluctantly, I realized David had usurped Marc in my affections. Along with a friend, there was a friend of mine, this guy I met in a record shop. We both realized we loved T-Rex. He'd already gotten into David Bowie, and he and I were like just ringing up each other for hours going, oh, have you seen Marc's? Oh, no. Yeah, no, I can't. Have you seen what Marc's shoes this week he's wearing? And David said, he'd rather blah, blah, blah. And we talk about all this stuff, or else it was so important to us. And one day we had to sadly admit to each other, Marc had released this album. He'd released Tanks, and we both realized he'd lost his magic touch. And at the same time, my friend Paul had lent me David Bowie live in Santa Monica, a bootleg, not even Ziggy Stardust. He'd give me the bootleg which was Ziggy Stardust and sort of all stuff from the old days when Bowie doing his old stuff, but now when all the world was very young, mountain magic have a hung, strange games I would play then. And it was like, whoa. And it was like, one had to go, this is it. It was like so David Bowie, like when the penny dropped, and I'm sad to say it didn't for me immediately. It didn't for me. He had earlier given me Hunky Dory, and I saw begrudgingly like, yeah. But when it turned into Ziggy Stardust, I don't know how anyone could have resisted that. It was the absolute best on every level, the best songs, the best playing, the best looking guys, the best words and lyrics, the best production, the best record covers, everything about it for a while there. And it kept on going for me. Beyond that, I sort of became a really big fan of Bowie and sort of considered myself quite a sort of and Bolan too. I would consider myself quite an expert. I dyed my hair bright red. My mother helped me do it. My father came home, sat down at the table, and he had like cognitive dissonance. He looked at it. He looked at my hair, and his eyes refused to tell his brain what was going. He looked at it and went, "What's for dinner, darling?" And he just couldn't dig it. No, I was like, I embraced every bit of it. The whole thing was a total package.
Kilbey isn't simply listing heroes. He's admitting that Bowie and Bolan gave him the permission to invent himself. From dyed hair to cosmic lyrics, they showed him that being an artist meant creating a world, not just a record. And when he talks about this period, you can still feel the teenage awe and devotion that shaped his identity as a performer.
In lyric writing, and I discovered this with Frank Sinatra, and I've always kept in mind, the most important thing is ambiguity. Ambiguity so that everybody can dig it. If you go too far, you turn into meaninglessness. And if you go too far the other way, then you're telling people exactly what they should be thinking. But somewhere is this sublime sweet spot of ambiguity where each listener can hear a song, my song, or other songs that are like that I thought about. Because I would listen to a song that had ambiguity and I'm going, now this feels like this guy's singing to me, and yet it's a very ambiguous song. How is he actually doing that? And I was by the time I was writing songs like Under the Milky Way, I'm specializing in this idea of giving them guidelines and letting the words just be a sprinkle on top of what the music's already telling them.
What Kilbey really reveals here is his secret weapon, ambiguity. Under the Milky Way endures because it never tells you exactly what it means. Instead, it gives us the space to dream our own meaning into it. And as he explains, that openness wasn't an accident. It was a conscious choice in his writing, and the reason why this song still resonates decades later.
I had a very relatively woundless life. Nothing really bad ever happened to me that I didn't cause myself. So I would imagine, I guess if I was sometimes singing about wounds, I was singing about imaginary wounds, like a writer, when you write a screenplay and someone in the screenplay has an unfortunate experience, you've got to imagine that if that hasn't actually happened to you. I guess that's what I sort of did as a songwriter. I'm sort of like, it's like, there was no way I could have done all the things that happened in the song. I was too busy touring around and being in studios. And yet in the albums, as I say, there's all these wonderful catastrophic sort of love affairs all sort of going wrong that never really happened. So definitely wounds, real and imaginary, definitely bind people together. There's this feeling you get when you're at that right age, when you're between 12 and 18 or whatever it is, and the right musician comes along and you get that connection. It's like, it's something you can't even, you can never really properly grow out of, and you can never analyze it away. You can never go, oh, he used to look silly doing that and these silly words and all that, yet still the magic will remain in the music. You won't be able to resist it. It's like it's become part of you. But after that age, after that sort of very impressionable age as a young man or woman, you know, between 12 and 18, I don't think things can sort of take their deep root in you anymore. Things become pleasant and you like them, but it's not like the you know, the stuff that happened in those teenage years, which is like when you were boys and looking for mentors back in Greece, you know, and you would meet some guy and he would teach you everything he knows. When you sort of listen to David Bowie, when you listen to Ziggy Stardust, he sort of teaches you everything he knows, that, and he promises you everything that's good, you know. But it is no doubt a really, you know, that thing grabs you, and then you grabbed forever.
Kilbey brushes off the idea that his art comes from wounds. Instead, he elevates imagination as the real source. His songs are less confession than creation, building worlds that let us project our own wounds, desires, and belongings into them. And in his own words, he explains why those teenage years are so powerful and why music from that time never really leaves us. So when we decode Steve Kilbey, we uncover a man shaped by contradiction, the passion of his father and the detachment of his mother, the sting of rejection and the thrill of belonging, the idols he adored and the world he built in their image. He gives us songs that are at once deeply personal and endlessly ambiguous, because in the end, his greatest gift isn't telling us about his life, but creating worlds where we can explore our own.